everyone, I'm Anastasia. I welcome you all to this new session of Fundamental of Nursing. So as in a previous session, as we have discussed about records and reporting, in this session we are going to discuss about the methods of recording. In today's session, I am going to teach you in detail about how you nurses can record, what are the different methods that you nurses can use when you are recording anything about the client. So here, as we all know, that recording is a permanent written communication that will be documenting all the information which is relevant to the client health status, right? Ranging from the identification data, from the physical examination, from the medical diagnosis, as well as the treatment and management which you as a nurse has provided for the client in order to help them promote their health. So since recording is very important, there are different methods through which you as a nurse can record. So by now we've got an idea that recording is very important, right? So as a nurse, there are 8 methods through which we can record, about the condition, about the management, about the treatment of the client. So here the first one is the narrative charting. The second is the source-oriented charting. The third is the problem-oriented charting. The fourth is the pie charting. The fifth is the focus charting. The sixth is the charting by exception. The second is the computerized documentation, and the eighth one, that is the last one, which is the case management with critical part. So here let us discuss about each method in detail. The first one, which is the narrative charting. So here from the name itself we can understand that narrative, right, means a story, means something in detail. So here in narrative charting, what we as nurse can do is we can record about the condition of the client in details. So here what we can do is we can describe the client status, we can describe the interventions as well as the treatment, and we can also describe about the response of the client to that particular treatment which we have been giving to them in a story format. So here, as I've said, that narrative charting means when you document something in detailed manner, right? So here what happens is that you will be documenting each and every information of the client in detail in a story format, whereby you'll be describing about the condition of the client, you'll be describing about whatever intervention you as a nurse has done for the client, as well as whatever treatments you have been providing for the client. And not only that, but here you will also be recording about the response of the client towards that particular treatment which you have been providing for them. However, now we can see that this narrative charting is not commonly used. We can see that this narrative charting is being replaced by the other format. Why? Because this method of recording takes a lot of time. So in order to reduce the amount of time it takes for a nurse to record something about the client, there are other formats which now is commonly used and has replaced this narrative charting. Moving on to the second one, that is the source-oriented charting. So here, source means from that particular person, right? So here, this source-oriented charting is also a narrative recording which is done by each member of the healthcare team on the separate record. So here in source-oriented charting, what happens is that there will be a record, okay, which will be done separately by each member of the healthcare team. As I've said that, a healthcare team will consist of nurse, of physicians, of dietitian, of physiotherapists, of the lab technicians, and so on and so forth, like whoever is responsible for providing care for the client. So here in the source-oriented charting, what happens is that each and every member of the healthcare team will have their own separate records, so that they will be able to record whatever intervention, whatever treatment, or whatever suggestion or advice they are giving for that particular client. So here, for example, the admission department has an admission sheet whereby they will be able to record whatever needed for that particular client as soon as the client is admitted. Then the nurse also has the nurse's notes where she can record all the interventions which she have performed And also the doctors have the doctor's notes, and so on and so forth. Like each and every healthcare team member will be having its own record sheet, whereby they will be able to record whatever suggestion, whatever advice, whatever intervention and treatment they have been providing for that particular client. And then the third one, which is the problem oriented source. So here in this problem oriented source, what happens is that this is a method of documentation which will emphasize on the problem of the client. So here what happens is that each member of the healthcare team will contribute to a single list of the identified client problems. So here from the name itself, you can understand, right, that it is a problem oriented charting. So what happens is that here each member of the healthcare team will work together and will contribute in order to emphasize on the problems of the client. This problem-oriented charting also uses a structured and a logical format which is called SOAP, S-O-A-P. So here S stands for subjective data, the O stands for the objective data, the A stands for the assessment, and the P stands for plan. So here, since it is a problem-oriented charting, what happens is that in order to get to know about the problem of the client, in order to emphasize on the client's problem, what we will be doing is we will be first collecting the subjective data, which means the information which we will be getting from the client, the problems which we will be hearing from the client. So here, for example, if the client is having pain, so when we are communicating with the client, when we are asking how are you feeling today, they may say that I am not feeling well because I'm having pain, I am not feeling well because I can't sleep. So whatever problems that they are sharing with you, that will serve as an subjective data, whereas the objective data is the one which you as a nurse will validate. So after the client has told the problem to you, the next thing you as a nurse must do is you must try to validate. So if the client says that, and get the idea of the pain rating scale, so that according to that we will be able to provide the intervention, we will be able to provide the treatment which will help their pain to reduce. And then after you've collected the subjective and the objective data, next is the assessment. So here you will be assessing the condition of the client, and usually what happens in the assessment is that after you've assessed the condition of the client, then there will be a conclusion which can be stated in the form of the nursing diagnosis or the client's problem. So after you have collected the subjective data, after you have validated it, after you have assessed and formulated a nursing diagnosis for that particular client problem, the next thing you can do is you can start planning. You can start planning for what are the interventions you can provide. You can start planning for what are the treatments which you can provide in order to help them promote their health. So as I've said, that this problem-oriented charting uses a structural as well as a logical format called SOAP, right? Where S stands for subjective, O stands for objective data, A stands for assessment, P stands for plan. However, recently this SOAP format has been, so as I've said, that this problem-oriented charting uses a structural as well as a logical format known as SOAP, right? S-O-A-P. However, in this recent time, this SOAP format has been replaced and has been modified as SOAPIER, S-O-A-P-I-E-R. Why it has been modified? It is modified for the better reflecting on the nursing process. So here again, S stands for subjective data, O stands for objective data, A stands for assessment, P stands for plan, I stands for intervention, E stands for evaluation, and R stands for revision. So here in the first format, we've seen that, we'll just be collecting the subjective, the objective data, we'll assess, and then we'll plan, right? So there, before it ends only till planning, but here through this recent format that is SOAPIER, what we will be able to do is we will be, collecting the subjective data, the objective data, we will be assessing, we will be planning, and after planning we will be also providing the intervention, after which we will be evaluating, and we will also be doing a revision, so that we will be getting an idea of whether that particular care which we has been providing can be followed or any changes needs to be made. So here through this format, it becomes very easier for us to provide care and also to reflect on the nursing process. Now moving on to the fourth one, that is the pie charting. So here now moving on to the fourth one, that is the pie charting. So here, as we all know, that the key component of the system are the assessment flow sheets and the nurse's progress notes with the plan of care, right? So here, what happens in this pie charting is that the pie notes are numbered according to the problems of the client. So here, because these problems of the client will be numbered, right? Then what happens is that all the problems, which is already resolved, will be dropped out from the daily documentation after the registered nurse has reviewed the condition of the client. So here, in simple words, I can say that, pie charting is a type of, recording whereby we will be numbering the problems of the client accordingly. So here what happens is that after we have stated the whole problem of the client, so after we registered nurses have reviewed the condition of the client, and when we find out that some of the problems which was listed has already been resolved, then we will be, again redocumenting it, and then we will also be dropping out those problems which has been resolved and will only be documenting the problems which are still present in the client. And also this PI is an abbreviation whereby P stands for the problem statement, the I stands for the intervention, and the E stands for the evaluation. So here, as I've said, that you will be stating the client's problem. After you have stated that, then you will be providing the intervention, after which you will be evaluating, so that you will be able to drop out the resolved problem from the daily documentation which you has been doing for the client. And then moving on to the next one, that is the focus charting. So here, from the name itself, you can understand that, we will be focusing, we will be emphasizing on the client. We will be focusing not only on the client health status, but also on the interventions, on the treatment, on the response to the particular treatment which we as nurse has been providing for the client. This focus charting is the method of identifying and organizing the narrative documentation of the client's concern. This method of documentation also consists of the notes that includes the data, which is both the objective and the subjective data, and also the action or the nursing intervention and the response of the client towards the particular treatment which they have been provided with. So here, as I've said, that here we will be focusing on the client health status, we'll be focusing on the response to the treatment, we'll be focusing on our intervention, right? So here, these notes are structured according to the client's concern. Okay, so here, when we are formulating, when we are recording the health status of the client, the condition of the client through this focus charting, then there are a few structured notes where then these notes are structured according to the client concerns. It is structured according to the sign and symptoms, then according to the nursing diagnosis, according to a significant event which has occurred for the client, according to the condition, according to the behavior, as well as any changes which has occurred in the condition of the client. This focus charting also uses a columnar format within the progress notes in order to distinguish the entry from the other recording in the narrative notes. So this focus charting will be using a columnar format within the progress notes so that we will be able to distinguish the entry from the other recordings in the narrative notes. So here inside the progress notes, they will be having different columns whereby you will be documenting the date, the time, the focus, as well as the progress notes of that client. So usually these progress notes are organized into data, which is represented by D, action by A, and response by R. So in data, again, what you will be documenting is that you'll be documenting about the subjective as well as the objective data. Then in the action, you will be documenting about whatever intervention you as a nurse has done for that particular client, and response, you will be documenting about the client response towards that particular treatment, that particular intervention which you has been providing for that particular client. So moving on to the next one, that is the charting by exception. So here what happens is that the nurse documents only the deviation which has occurred from the pre-established norms. Like it can be, any abnormalities or any significant findings that has shown that they had lead to a deviation from the pre-established norms. And while using this method, you as a nurse must also keep in mind that you should avoid lengthy as well as repetitive notes. So as a nurse, whenever you are documenting or whenever you are recording using this CBE method, there are some key elements that is required, which is that you should practice setting the documentation policies and procedures. So as a nurse, whenever you are adopting this method while you are recording the condition of the client or the client health status, there are certain key elements which you must keep in mind. The first one is that you should practice the setting documentation policies as well as the protocols. You should also assess the norms as well as the standard of care. You should have an individualized care plan as well as you can use the unique flow sheet. And then moving on to the next one, that is the computerized documentation. So this computerized documentation is the process of recording whereby you will be doing it with the help of the computer. So this is also, the most effective and the most commonly used one. Why? Because it stores the data. It also increases the quality of the documentation and saves time as well. And not only that, but it also increases the legibility as well as the accuracy, and it facilitates the statistical analysis of the data. Since there are so many advantages which we are getting through this computerized documentation, then that is why this is universally used, and this is the most preferable type of documentation in today's world. The next one is the case management process. So here in the case management process, what happens is that there is a methodology for organizing the client's care when he or she is ill by using a standardized care plan or a critical pathway. So here this critical pathway is a multidisciplinary plan or a tool that will specify the assessment, the intervention, the treatment, as well as the outcome of the health which is related to the problem across the timeline. So this is about the case management process. Now moving on to the last method, that is the graphic sheets and the flow chart. So here from the name itself, you can understand that this is a method of recording whereby we will be using the graphic sheets and the flow charts. Since we all know that the healthcare record entry should reflect the most recent assessment, in order to ensure that the treatment decision are based on the accurate information, right? So here, if documentation is done on a flow sheet or on the checklist, what happens is that the check marks can be used as long as it is clear who performed the assessment and what were the interventions which was provided for that particular client. So here, as I've said, that recording of the client's treatment of the intervention can also be done through the graphic sheets as well as the flow sheets, right? So here, this method also helps us to save time when we are recording. So if there is presence of checklist whereby you can put check marks in order to make sure that you have documented that whether the particular intervention has been performed or not, whether that particular treatment has been provided or not, you must make sure that that particular check mark or that particular symbol which you have used must be identified in the practice setting policy. So these are the various methods which we nurses can use when we are recording the information of the client. Now, in order to minimize the legal liability through effective record keeping, we must make sure that whenever we record anything, we must specify the date as well as the time. We must also make sure that if we are doing it, in a writing format, then it must be legible. It must be, able to be read by the other members as well. And also, since this record will serve as a permanent one, we must make sure that we must handle it carefully. We must keep it carefully. And also, whenever we record anything, we nurses must make sure that we put our signature on it. And also, whenever we record, we must make sure that we do it in a sequence manner. And also, it should be appropriate, it should be complete as well as concise. And we should make sure that we use terminologies which is only accepted and which is only universally used, so that this particular terminology will be understood by all the members of the healthcare team. So these are the various things that you as a nurse must keep in mind whenever you are recording or documenting the information of the client. And also, if you have made any error and correction needs to be done, then these are the few things that you can follow. So the first one is that if you have spilled something on the chart by mistakenly, you should not discard the notes. Okay, so here what you must do is that you must recopy, but the original and the copied sheets must be present in the chart itself. You must also write copied on the copy chart. So here, in case if you have spilled something, or in case if you have by mistakenly tore the sheet of the client, then what you must do is that you must not discard that sheet. You can take another sheet whereby you can recopy everything once more, and also put these sheets together in the chart of the client, so that there will not be any confusion, and so that it will serve as a proof that whatever you have copied, it is the same way, is the same one. You should also make sure that you should not scribble out the charting. You should avoid using errors or make any mistake in recording the client's name while you are making any corrections. You should also follow your facility policy. You should not alter the charting, because why, this charting, it can also be served as a legal document, right? So here, whenever you make any corrections, whenever you correct any errors, you can do it by drawing a single horizontal line through the error. So you should not scribble, or you should not circle it, but what you can do is that you can only draw a single horizontal line through the error. And also, after this has been done, the next thing you can do is you can write the word error above the line and then put your signature. And you must also make sure that there is no ink eradication, and also ensure or use the occlusive material. So these are the various things that you can do in case if you have made any errors, or you have made any correction on the errors which has been done by you. So these are the various things you can do while you are correcting the errors. So now here we have come to the end of this session. So in today's session, we have discussed about the methods of recording. So I hope that you guys have got a clear understanding of the 8 methods of recording, as well as I've also taught you about what are the various things that you must keep in mind whenever you are recording any information about the client, and also what are the various things you can do if you had made any errors while you are documenting or recording the information of the client. So I hope this class was effective. I'll be meeting you guys in the next session, whereby we will be discussing about the furthermore topics of this particular unit. So until then, have a good day. Thank you.